A marathon is around 42 kilometres in length. That'd be the same as going up and back down Mount Everest twice, and then almost reaching its peak for a third time. Of course, it's not the same as climbing a mountain, but imagine what it'd be like to run that distance over every single continent. Australia, Europe, Asia, Africa, North and South America, and Antarctica.
So my name is Tracy. I'm 50 years old. My first marathon, I was 42. A few years ago, I realised that I sort of managed to run on 2 or 3 continents, and I thought, maybe, putting some sort of goal around doing the races rather than just doing race after race could be helpful. So I decided to have a go at doing all 7 continents, and I entered for the Antarctica Marathon about 4 years ago. There's a long wait list, and I got lucky for this year. So I went down there, ticked it off, and got my 7 continents medal.
The 7 continents medal. Only 625 people in the world have one, and it grants you access to the 7 Continents Club. If you haven't noticed, I'm out for a run. I'm trying to find out if I can run the distance of Mount Everest, which is just over a fifth of an actual marathon. So far, I've only ran 2 kilometres and I'm already exhausted. How on earth do marathon runners have the mentality to run 42 kilometres?
It's the training for it is the main thing. It's the journey to get there rather than the race itself. And the training keeps me fit, keeps me running all year round. Running a marathon itself, it depends very much on the race. It's whether it's a road race or a trail race, whether it's a really huge one or a small one. And it also depends how you're feeling on the day. If you're having a really good race, then you'll feel happy all the way through it and you'll feel elated at the end. If you're having a shocker of a race, then you know all the way you're going through it that the result isn't going to be what you hoped for. And you can feel a little bit low at the end, but then you just got to pick yourself up and train for the next one.
Running a marathon in Auckland is one thing, but I imagine Antarctica is a hang of a lot different. It'd be freezing cold for one thing. How would you prepare yourself for that?
One of the things that I did, it was training in a client's freezer. So they cranked that down to -20 for me, and they put the fans on to simulate the wind. And I ran around there for about half an hour or so, and then I couldn't cope with it anymore. It was too cold. But the good thing about that is I tried some of my gear out in there, and I realised that it wasn't going to be warm enough. So I ended up going out and buying some heavier gear.
The best way to know how it felt to be on Antarctica without really being on Antarctica seems to be standing inside an industrial freezer. So here I am at the supermarket inside their freezer, and it's negative 18 degrees in here. My hands are shaking and I've got ice stuck to my shoes. It's absolutely freezing in here. I don't understand how she could run a marathon in these temperatures. Usually on a race you'd have supporters with you at the sidelines, but when you're in a remote continent like Antarctica, you can't really bring your friends and family with you.
It's interesting. The journey wasn't so much just about the ultimate run. It's about the whole experience. So you get on a boat from South America and you're on the boat for 2 days crossing the Drake Passage. And the Drake Passage are notoriously one of the sort of, most difficult crossings, ocean crossings, and usually really, really rough. We got lucky. It was a really smooth crossing. So it meant that nobody was feeling particularly ill and we had a chance to all really get to know each other. And you're on a boat with 100 other runners. So lots of conversation about different events and different running techniques and all that sort of thing. And what it means is when you're doing the race itself, there are very few supporters out there, but you know everyone who's doing the race. And because it's 6 loops, you keep seeing everybody all the way around. So it's quite a different feeling to a lot of other trail races because you feel like you've got the support from the other runners. The track itself, it's like running along a gravel road, but there are sort of icy puddles, there's snow on the ground. It did actually snow quite heavily. When you look around, you'll see quite a few small lakes, frozen lakes. You're running right beside the ocean, so you can see the sea and icebergs floating by. In the distance, you can see glaciers. We were very, very fortunate to have an emperor penguin appear. Poor little Mike was way off course. He was all by himself, and I don't like to think about what his future was going to hold. But he came on shore and he actually stood under the finish line. So for those people who were finishing at that time, that was very fortunate. In terms of actually running in Antarctica, sometimes I just had to pinch myself, because you look around and you see icebergs and glaciers, penguins, and it feels a bit surreal, really. If you think about the Antarctica Marathon, you imagine running through snow and ice. It's all about just about having the right gear. So you have shoes with little spikes on, and that gives you a good grip. Waterproof shoes, so you don't end up with soaking wet feet. And lots of layers, lots of merino to keep warm, and gloves and balaclava, things you probably wouldn't normally think of putting on for a run.
So the question on everyone's lips, how do you go to the toilet?
Oh, you're wearing lots of layers, but it's just your normal gear. So yeah, it was straightforward enough. And it's quite funny. They set up portable toilets on the island where we run, and I went into one of the portaloo things. It's basically a tent with a barrel. And I looked at this barrel and I thought, I'm going to have to stand on tiptoe to even get anywhere near it. But I managed to sort of convolute myself and go to the loo. And then as I was going around, I mentioned to one of the others, gosh, those loos aren't really designed for women, are they? And she said, if you try the one next door, the barrel's about half the size. That's the men's one.
So I've ran 2.5 kilometres, hopped into a freezer at negative 18 degrees. Honestly, it doesn't seem very easy at all, and surely running in the wild would have a lot of risks involved.
Probably one of the ones is getting hypothermia, getting too cold. There isn't really much of a risk of getting lost because it's a very well marked route. It's an easy route. You've got to be a fast enough runner to be able to make it in the cutoff. The cutoff was generous, I felt, 6.5 hours I think it was. So you had to be able to run the marathon in under that. And there was one guy who insisted on running the race in a singlet and shorts, and by the end of doing his 6 loops, he was absolutely frozen. And I think it took him a wee while to warm up afterwards.
And should something go wrong, how does someone save you?
There's an airstrip there, so if necessary, if somebody needed to be evacuated, they could be. And there were actually 2 people evacuated off our ship who had pneumonia, so a lot of people didn't get to finish their marathon.
So what's the desire?
It was all about basically achieving that 7 continents goal. Antarctica wasn't somewhere that I would have probably gone to. Having been there now, I would say to anyone, if you ever get the opportunity to go there, jump at the chance. It's such an amazing place to visit. It feels so remote. When you're going on the Antarctic continent, on the sort of mainland as such, there might be the odd tiny little storage shed on a beach, and that's it. There's no other, when you're stepping out of the Zodiacs, the sort of black rubber boats that you have to use to get from the ship onto the shore, there's no jetties or anything like that. You're literally stepping out into the water. And so it does give you the feeling that you are really in the wild. And seeing the animals in their natural habitat, that was something that I hadn't really thought about. I was looking forward to seeing penguins, but we saw 180 whales in the week, and really close up. So we'd be in the Zodiac, and the whales would be popping their head up right next door. You could have reached out and touched them if that was allowed. So that was really special. And the penguins were just incredible. So thousands of penguins, literally thousands. When we very first saw Antarctica, so we woke up in the morning and overnight we'd come close to land. And we looked out on the shore and I thought, gosh, that looks like a really jagged rock, sort of rocky hill. And then when I looked closer, I realised it wasn't jagged rocks, it was penguins lining the whole of the hill all the way up. And you could just sort of like see a little zigzag as each penguin was standing next to each other.
You might be thinking, for someone who's conquered every continent, there isn't much left for Tracy to achieve. But next year she'll be heading to the North African desert to conquer the toughest foot race on earth, the Marathon des Sables.
The race itself is 250 kilometres in the desert. That takes place over 6 days. I'm training at the moment with a focus on speed, so that I'm not on my feet for as much during the race. Obviously, the faster you can do each day, the more recovery time you've got. It's harder each year as you get older. You naturally get a little bit slower, so you've got to work that much harder to try and get faster again. And I'll be running overdressed. So if you see someone running around Grey Lynn with a balaclava and merino and various woolly layers on in the middle of summer, that'll be me training for the Marathon des Sables.